I would like to welcome everyone and thank you for joining us on this beautiful day to hear and have a dialogue with a diverse panel of experts on COVID-19 vaccine. Before moving forward, I would like to thank you, the organizers, especially Amanpreet Kaur, Kiran Kaur Gill, and Amrita Kular, and the sponsor and especially PCC, the Punjabi Chamber of Commerce, and SELDAF, Sikh American Legal Defense and Education Fund, for providing the platform to share the information and educate ourselves to make the decisions that are not just affecting ourselves, but our families and our communities as well. Punjabi Chamber of Commerce is a non-profit organization funded by the generous support of the Punjabi community. Established in 2017 by the members of Indian Punjabi community in the greater New York and New Jersey area. PCC is dedicated to uniting and Punjabi community globally. We are strictly non-partisan, non-political, and non-religious organization. Since our inception, we have helped entrepreneurs grow their businesses, professionals lead their organizations, and community leaders expand their reach. Our members come from varied backgrounds ranging across all sectors and industries, from large corporates to SMEs and entrepreneurs located in USA, Canada, United Kingdom, and India. About SELDAF, founded in 1996, the Sikh American Legal Defense and Education Fund is a national Sikh American media policy and education organization. SELDAF's mission is to empower Sikh Americans by building dialogue, deepening understanding, promoting civic and political participation, and upholding social justice and religion freedom for all Americans. Since the start of pandemic, SELDAF has been working hard to keep the community informed on COVID safety protocol, legislation, and COVID treatments like vaccine. Today, we have three panelists with us who are coming from very diverse background, but key expertise in COVID area. First, I'd like to introduce Dr. Ansha Baranova, who is a professor at Schools of System Biology. She's a director for the Chronic Metabolic and Rare Diseases System Biology Initiative at College of Science, George Mason University. The strongest aspect of her research program lies in the interdisciplinary nature. In over more than 20 years of active time in academia, she developed an expertise in a variety of the research fields. Her lab has discovered many biomarkers for chronic illnesses, diseases, cancer, and other illnesses. Recently, her lab has entered in a field of anti-aging research. Her work in personalized medicine has an emphasis on longitudinal monitoring and management of health in pre-symptomatic individuals and augmenting body's homeostasis. Last year, she spent most of the time on COVID-19 and post-COVID-19 related problems. Our next panelist that I'd like to introduce is Jatinder Kaur. She's a scientific director of the Hepatology and Virology group at AbbVie in the Medical Affairs Department. She is with AbbVie for the last 4 years, but has over 20 years of experience in pharma. Prior to joining AbbVie, Jatinder was the head of strategy and operations for genomic medicine at Takeda Pharmaceuticals. She has extensive background in research design and supporting various phases of clinical development and operations. In her free time, she enjoys reading and traveling with her family. Our third panelist that I'd like to introduce today is Dr. Amandeep Tagore. Dr. Tagore is a native Texan board certified in emergency medicine with a subspecialty in EMS and disaster medicine. He trains physicians in the same field. He is Associate Director of EMS and Disaster Medicine Fellowship and core teaching program at New York, Beth Rutgers Health. He is involved in medical mission work abroad and focuses on establishing EMS systems in developing and third world countries. He also is heavily involved in teaching physicians in developing third world countries point of care ultrasound to diagnose and treat patients who may not have the latest imaging technology readily available to them. Other affiliations include his role as flight physician for multiple air ambulance agencies. Dr. Tagore is also active in event medicine, working concert, marathons, etc. One of Dr. Tagore's professional interest is tactile medicine. In spare time, he enjoys spending time with family. Now, before moving forward, I would like to read the disclaimers because most our panelists, they are coming from different organizations. So the opinions and advice provided by our panelists today, they are based on their own experiences and knowledge, and they do not represent any organization. We recommend you to follow the CDC guidelines to reduce the risk of COVID-19. Just to give you a highlight of what we will be covering today, so in the next 30 to 40 minutes, we will go through some of the common concerns, the challenges, new development, and recommendation of COVID-19 vaccines. We will open the line to have a dialogue with our experts in 7:15. So please feel free either to have a question in the message box or raise your hand so we can bring you guys on the stage so you guys can ask the question directly to the panelist. And I think with that, we can start our webinar today with all the panelists. So before moving forward, I would like to share my screen and Ginny, can you help me with the sharing the screen, please?
Just try now again.
Yeah. Is it being shared?
Not now.
So just to give you an idea of how many vaccines have been rolled out. So we have 3 different vaccines that have been rolled out during this year. One of them is coming from Pfizer, the other one from Moderna, and the latest one that we have is coming from Johnson & Johnson. Now, in terms of the shots, with Pfizer, we need 2 doses, which are 3 weeks apart. For Moderna, we again need 2 doses, which are 4 weeks apart. And with Johnson & Johnson, we need only one dose. The common side effects that we have seen with Pfizer is fatigue, headache, chills, muscle pain, and worse after the second dose. And with the Moderna, we see the similar kind of side effects, which includes fever, muscle aches, headaches, which last for a few days and kind of worse after the second dose. Whereas with Johnson & Johnson, we see the injection site pain, headache, fatigue, and muscle pain after the one shot that we get. So in terms of like how we are or when we think we are fully protected from these medicines, with Pfizer, it's 2 weeks after the second dose. With Moderna, it is 2 weeks after the second dose. And with Johnson & Johnson's, again, it's 2 weeks after the second dose. The other question that we get a lot is, should we get vaccinated if we already have the COVID and we have recovered from it? And the answer is yes. And now I will ask our panelists the question that that we are getting very commonly. And I will ask, like, this is a question to all the panelists. We can start from this one. So please unmute your mic. And the question is, what are the main differences between all the vaccines? And do we think anyone is safer as compared to one or the other? And do we think they are more efficient one over the other? So Dr. Ansha, maybe you can go first.
Thank you so much, Manpreet, for inviting me to this wonderful panel. And thank you for this wonderful introduction which you gave to me. Indeed, we have 3 vaccines here in the United States. Right now, we have 2 mRNA vaccines. These are Pfizer and Moderna. They are very similar to each other in its action. If you will look into the constituents of the vaccine, you will see that there are only minor differences between them. And they are worked in the same fashion. Johnson & Johnson vaccine is of different kind. It's made on the basis of adenovirus. So the S protein of the coronavirus is delivered with the help of adenovirus platform. But altogether, all three vaccines, even if you have two on one side, one on another side, are adequately protecting us against the challenges with new coronavirus. We cannot really say that one vaccine is better than another, and every vaccine have its own advantages. And in Johnson & Johnson, the chief advantage is that you need to go there only once. Logistically, for many places within the country, this is a very, very important advantage. Speaking about Moderna and Pfizer, they were all first. So our older people get mostly those two kinds of vaccines, one or another. And the differences between them also was mostly logistic, because for Pfizer, we needed lower temperature than for Moderna. Because of that, the hospitals were selected as sites for Pfizer distribution, and Moderna with lesser problems with the logistic chain was given in the more relaxed situations like CVS, Walgreens, etc. But right now, the best vaccine is the vaccine which you can get right away. As sooner all of us will get vaccinated, as faster we will reach herd immunity and coronavirus will be over.
Okay, thank you. Jitendra, you're coming from a pharmaceutical background. What is your take on this?
I think Ansha covered all of the key points, but the piece that I think that drives that differentiation between the viruses is really what is their effectiveness and what is their efficiency that has seen across all of the clinical trials that have been done. So I know that each of the companies that have conducted these vaccine trials, they're not done on just a few hundred patients, right? They're done on multiple thousands of patients. The Johnson & Johnson team studied the vaccine in 32,000 people. The Moderna, as well as the Pfizer vaccine, was studied in over 40,000 people. And so each of them has a little different take on the sample size and the enrollment of the types of population. But we can say that at the combination of all of these trials, they've looked at a broad breadth of the population to be able to make those assessments, right? They've looked at generally in Caucasians, but also have studied minority populations. They've also been studied in those with ongoing comorbidities, as well as those facing oncologic conditions that might have immunosuppressed states. So I think the fact that we have promising data across all three of these vaccines makes them all a promising opportunity for us to move beyond the pandemic. With the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, we saw that there was a 66% efficacious result across protecting from the severest form of effects of the COVID virus itself. And that was seen across multiple countries that this drug, that the vaccine was tested in. It is also shown to be 85% effective in protecting against hospitalizations, which is the most severe side effects that we've seen that continue to drive some of the restrictions that have been placed on us during this pandemic. And then there were no hospitalizations or deaths seen among the largest arms of those trials, which is really promising. And then for the Moderna, as well as for the Pfizer vaccines, we've seen efficacy results in 95 and 94%. That means that the way that they tested immune responses for those individuals after some period from the second dose of that vaccine demonstrated that 95 or 94% of that population that was tested, so those 30 to 40,000 patients that were involved in those trials, showed a response that was equivalent to demonstrating good immune coverage from the vaccine. So all of these, I think, are really, really promising data. And I would echo what Ansha said. The decision about whether one vaccine trumps another really is based on the ability to receive that vaccine, especially when there's challenges with cold supply chain. As Ansha mentioned, the Pfizer vaccine must be stored at really, really low temperatures. So that prevents the ability to ship or support the ultimate use of it in a broadest sense. But the other opportunity with Johnson & Johnson that also Ansha mentioned is really that single dose and being able to have that protective effect. And so again, echoing my panelist, is that the most efficient vaccine is the one that you have access to readily.
Great, thank you. I know that there are some questions in the panel box, and I will get to that once we are done kind of giving a background about the vaccination. So we will definitely get to those questions. But all questions are good questions. So please, if you do have, please type it in there. Next, I will ask Dr. Tagore his view, because he is the one who is dealing with the patient in everyday life. So Dr. Tagore, what is your view on this? What do you think?
Yes, thank you. And thank you for having me today. So one of the biggest things I think that we kind of all have been focusing on is this number of efficiency and effectiveness. And so looking at percentages, and everyone keeps talking about, well, this percentage is higher and this is lower. And I mean, I think that's the kind of wrong way to approach this. I 100% agree. People ask me, which vaccine should I get? And I said, which one can you get first? And that's the simple answer. Right now, I don't think that we should be differentiating between any particular vaccine over another. Certainly, when you look at the numbers, the biggest thing we talk about is what does that mean? What does that number actually mean? And what does this trials have shown? Now, Pfizer, Moderna, and obviously Johnson & Johnson, all three of them are having ongoing trials even still. They're adding different variables, they're testing different populations, they're testing kids now. But slowly they're gonna keep adding a more robust trial and start filtering in stuff so they can give you and provide you for more data. The information that they initially had was looking at some very core measures. And what we're looking for is, did anyone die from this vaccine from COVID? Were there hospitalizations from COVID? Did you get sick from COVID? So the question is that when you talk about efficiency, no one's dying after you get this vaccine from COVID. That's huge. You know, COVID has, you know, in 2020 was the third largest killer. You know, so I mean, the third leading cause of death in the United States. So when we talk about something that's, you know, devastating such a huge amount of people in the United States, to be able to get a vaccine that will not kill you from this virus, that's a huge, huge win, and it's a victory from a scientific perspective. That being said, what does the number mean? It just means that, yes, if you get exposed to the virus from one way or another, and you are inoculated with it in a high enough amount, you may have some symptoms. So if you're telling me that I get sick just like a normal flu for about a week or so, maybe max, and that's the end of it, I don't get hospitalized, I don't die, I'll take that. You know, if you tell me that if you expose me to COVID right now and I just get a little sick and then I'm better after a week or two, I think that's great. And more specifically, when we look at the data, when we talk about Pfizer, Moderna, and Johnson & Johnson, the trials were done differently, and they were done at a different time. You know, Pfizer and Moderna were done very early on in the game when we didn't deal with variants, and Johnson & Johnson actually studied variants, and they looked at specific variants that were very popular and you know, very prevalent within the United States. And Johnson & Johnson did a multinational trial. So they weren't just pockets of a trial. So you're going to see a more realistic number, to be very honest with you, with the Johnson & Johnson. So, you know, does that mean that Pfizer and Moderna don't protect against variants? No, not necessarily, but it does mean that the data that we're seeing does not include that specifically. And so we take that with a grain of salt. More studies are now being done on the variants, and we talk about that, you know, and we know that, you know, certain variants, Pfizer still does protect against the variants, and so does Moderna. But, you know, we have to do more trials to actually prove that.
Thank you. I'd like to share my screen. I'll try to do that again. And this is Dr. Tagore for you. If you can help us expand on the New Jersey data that we got recently, the survey data that we got.
Sure.
So what are your views on this data?
Sure. So there's a lot of surveillance going on. Number one, I'll comment to just about, you know, one of the reasons why we're doing this today. You know, we're looking at people getting vaccinated. And what is a subset of population that's actually getting vaccinated in New Jersey, let's say? So we know that Asians, so that includes, you know, obviously Asians across the continent, less than 9% of the people getting vaccinated are Asian. So less than 10% of the people who get the vaccine are Asian. So we're doing a, you know, really kind of poor job as far as our own population to get vaccinated. When you look at the number of people who got vaccinated, about 58% of them were white. So we talk about, white Americans who are actually getting vaccinated. The people who got the vaccine, less than 60%, right around there, are white Americans. So we have to kind of make sure that, we actually go out in numbers to get vaccinated as well. This is kind of the reasons why we're doing this, is so we can give some awareness of what the vaccine is, and if there is some hesitancy, how can we actually address that? And when we talk about hesitancy, starting in December, going into March, we looked at some surveys about what are some hesitancies and what are some of the thoughts that some of the people have. And when we look at this graph, we're looking at basically people who have gotten the vaccine, people who want the vaccine as soon as possible. And some people who are saying, you know what, I want to see how other people do, see what the data shows after a while, and then maybe I'll get it. And there's some people who are saying, absolutely not, I'm not going to get it. And as we see this kind of moving towards the trend of, more and more people are getting it, the number of people who want it kind of as soon as possible kind of roughly stays around kind of the same in the 30%. But we look at the people who wait and see, there are less and less people who are waiting to see. I think there are people now who are realizing this is actually, there's a good two ways of kind of ending this. It's either you get the virus or you get the vaccine. And we kind of see that, we're seeing thousands and millions of people now getting the vaccine nationwide. And we're not seeing people like, getting, the adverse effects that people are afraid of. So I think that hesitancy now is improving. And we're starting to see people who are a little bit more amenable to actually getting the vaccine and less kind of worrisome about, what's up our sleeve and why this was done so fast. I think this is a scientific feat that we were able to get it done so fast. And we should be applauding ourselves and applauding our scientists for doing this so quickly and using technology to our advantage, not so much, putting a eye of skepticism in the fact that it was done so quickly.
Thank you, Dr. Tagore. If I have to say that in few words, it's more about if you're getting a vaccine, it's a smarter decision, not for yourself, for your family also. And it's very interesting that now this the whole group is kind of shrinking down. They're not wait and watching for what's going to happen if they're not getting the vaccine. That comes up another kind of interesting question for you, Dr. Ansha. There are young folks who are saying, okay, I'm young. I do not want to get vaccine. Even if I get the coronavirus, I will get well soon. So there is hesitancy in terms of the vaccine there. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, there are a couple of important thoughts. One important thought directly for this young population which does not want to get vaccinated simply because they have other things to do. Maybe they don't have time to get to the vaccination point, or they entertain their freedom because they can say no. COVID, coronavirus disease, unfortunately, is the disease which does not spare young. Indeed, in spring of 2020, we were thinking that yes, people who get it mildly really get it mildly, and that's the end of it. It's not like this. We are having large amounts of young people right now who are having post-COVID disorder. About 30% of people who suffered COVID, even if it was mild or moderate, those people never been to hospitals. They do have a host of various kinds of symptoms, even 6 months after they recovered from the disease. And what's troubling that many of those symptoms are neurological or related to their overall brain central nervous system performance. Young people, you don't want to have it. So better you get vaccinated and prevent it. Second point is a public health point. We actually need to get to herd immunity in order to protect the most vulnerable. We are people, we are humans, and we should extend the helping hand to those people who cannot get immunity even if they are getting vaccinated. There is some amount of people with weakened immune system who can get vaccine shot, but vaccine shot is not as efficient as in the majority of the population. Still good to have a vaccine, but in order to have those populations covered, we need to have their relatives and all the contacts covered as well. Young people, you are those contacts. You need to protect your family.
I'm glad, Ansha, you actually expanded your views on it's essentially the phase 4 of the COVID vaccine, the whole phase, like how we get it, and then what actually it leads to. Because I think as of now, only 3 phases were more talked about. And the 4th phase, which now we are looking into the secondary complications, they are getting highlighted more and more. So thank you so much for expanding on that. Jatinder, so question for you. I have seen a lot of hesitancy from people since they are thinking because it's DNA or it's RNA, and they think it might become a part of their genetic material. So since you have been working in the vaccination department, so what are your thoughts on that?
Thank you, first of all, for that question, because I think there's so much confusion and fear based on just the lack of understanding around how the viruses were developed. And I want to clarify, and I know Dr. Amanpreet mentioned this as well, that from the pharmaceutical industry, the research that went into putting together these vaccines wasn't developed overnight. You know, this is multiple, almost decades of research that had already been ongoing and was just accelerated given the funding and the opportunities that became available to actually deploy some of the learnings that had been moving at the rapid pace or the slow pace that they were earlier, right? I think for those of us working in the scientific arena, we've been trying to work around the clock, and really all other attentions have been diverted to focus on opportunities to improve where we are with COVID, as well as provide opportunities for treatments. And so I don't want to provide this misnomer that there was a, magical switch that happened and everything was done in secrecy. This is research that has culminated over decades of learning. And I think the first SARS infection really triggered some of that earlier research, and that has been going on for close to a decade. Additionally, the recent outbreak of Ebola just a few years ago really has put a high point around the danger that these viruses pose. And so some of the technology that you see with the use of mRNA vaccines is not brand new technology, but it's really become an opportune time for us to deploy it and understand the effects of that technology. And so to clarify, the Pfizer as well as the Moderna vaccines actually use an mRNA, which is a messenger RNA. It is part of your makeup of your body that actually helps translate genetic material into proteins, but it is not part of your DNA, which is replicated from cell to cell. The messenger RNA is a piece of your DNA, and its job really is to be that translation vehicle. And it allows for that mRNA or messenger RNA is really fragile, and it's intended to be in small pieces, and it gets chopped up by our body's natural enzymes and then is used to translate those sort of what we would call translational materials to help develop proteins. And so when we think about the SARS-CoV-2 virus itself, it actually looks sort of, in my mind and how I describe it to my family as well, as it looks like a volleyball with spikes going all around. And in terms of doing that research, what they have found is that those spikes that surround the virus really is what's used to enter human cells and continue and proliferate to drive infection. And so some of the targets that the research community has been looking at is really to understand how can we use that material and the coding using the virus to represent the spikes to actually provide a sort of a trigger to our internal immune system to recognize that and fight that. So when the mRNA is designed, it's actually only a small piece of that spike protein that it is being coded to recognize. So it's not a full genetic understanding of the virus itself. It actually only has one component of it, which is related to the spikes. The virus itself actually lives in that giant volleyball type of image, if you think of it that way. And so once they actually enter the cell, the mRNA's job is actually to work with the machinery inside your body and translate that to replicate that spike protein. And so once that spike protein is created, it actually is displayed on the outside of that cell where it is being replicated. And that then is recognized and picked up by our immune system. And it's initially recognized by T cells and then by B cells. And then that memory of those T and B cells is what helps sustain that immunity. But what I want to reemphasize is that that mRNA, that's that translational vehicle that entered the cell, does not ever become part of our genetic material. What we're trying to do with these vaccines is really develop an immune response. And that's what we want our body to remember and develop so that it can prevent from the severest case of that COVID infection.
Thank you. Thank you. I don't think so. It could have been explained in a better way. So if I have to conclude that, it's more about you have the mRNA that is injected in your body. It gets into your cell. It does the job it needs to do, and then it gets degraded. It does not get incorporated in the genetic material.
Absolutely.
Great. Thank you. So another hesitancy that I've seen from a lot of people, it's because of the underlying condition. And Dr. Amandi, would like to get your feedback on this. Like, how do you interpret this when people do see, okay, they have the underlying conditions like diabetes or obesity, and do they, because one of the concerns is they might be seeing like more adverse events because of the vaccination. So do you agree with this, or how would you explain that?
Sure. I don't think that there's any data out there that says that, people who have certain, diseases are more prone to getting sick or having some type of adverse effect. That's completely false. What's interesting, and what I find interesting, is that when we talk about enlarge of vaccinations throughout the United States, we obviously rolled it out to the healthcare providers initially, but then we then rolled it out to the elderly. So within 5 months now, we have inoculated millions and millions of elderly people over the age of 65. And so when we talk about the over the age of 65, how many of these people had comorbidities? So the first and primary group of people at long-term care facilities, nursing homes, and elderly at home are all having multiple comorbidities getting the vaccine. And in the last 5 months, you think about it, these people have all gotten it. And we haven't really seen anything robust to where we say like there's an adverse effect. These people are having really bad reactions compared to, the norm. So I don't think that's true. And I don't think that that's really the case. And again, like we said, we're watching people, 15 minutes after they get the vaccine administered. And when we talk about severe reactions and anaphylaxis, they're very rare, they're very minimal. And so, the benefit versus the risk of getting it is, there. Now, when we talk about people who get COVID, people who have a history of diabetes and who have hyperglycemia, so elevated blood sugars, those patients are the ones that are at risk of having, a worse outcome and fared worse when hospitalized. So those are the patients that are at risk, and those are people we have to worry about.
Yeah, I would like to also ask a question that has been asked by one of the attendees. The question is there a concern of belt palsy with either Moderna or Pfizer? Have you seen anything with the vaccination?
So there have been publications, and people have posted on people who have started to get Bell's palsy from the vaccination. When we talk about these reactions, the question is it a coincidence, or is it actually something that's happening as a phenomenon? And when we talk about this, you have to look at, is it statistically significant? And the data out there does not prove that it's statistically significant that this is what's causing it, that there is a correlation with the vaccine and Bell's palsy. Bell's palsy, a disease that can happen. You have to have had, like chickenpox early on, when you were younger, and then it kind of, can bring it on from there. It can come on from herpes. It can come on from inflammation. It can come on from an ear infection. There are multiple things that can bring this on. So it's not just one thing. Lyme disease, lots of factors that can cause people to have Bell's palsy. And so it doesn't necessarily mean that the vaccine was the one that caused it. It could have been just timing and coincidence that it can actually happen. People can get sick just normally, and people can have progression of disease just normally, and it just show up, and it just happened to be that you actually got a vaccine at the same time.
Great, thank you so much. I hope that it satisfied the question. And moving onward, Ansha, a question for you. There is again, there is a question from the panelists also, but how do we know that the vaccines they have worked, and how do we know that we are immune to COVID-19?
Well, there are direct tests which would show that there are antibodies in your blood. Unfortunately, those tests are correlative in nature. We are scientists. We are looking for correlation of the presence of antibodies and certain levels of antibodies with immunity. Immunity has two arms. One of the arms is visible arm. This is your antibodies, which are easy to measure. Another arm is invisible arm. It is your T-cell response, which we cannot account for that easy as we do with antibodies. Your immunity is a sum of two. So antibodies themselves are correlative measure. And of course, it's good to have antibodies. And as more specific antibodies you get, as more likely you have neutralizing antibodies and specific response to the virus. But it cannot guarantee that the response would work all the time, because you need also to account for T-cell immunity. And also, if you don't have antibodies, or if antibodies are low, it is not necessarily meaning that you are completely unprotected, because your T-cell response still could work in that time. This is the best measure which we could offer right now. After the vaccine, you can get just regular test for antibodies. There are two tiers of those tests. One which will show just positive or negative. And the second tier, which could be asked by your healthcare provider, is the level of the antibodies, which would give you a number, which give you a health provider a number. Usually, just positive or negative test is enough. But if you are having some kind of underlying condition which weakens your immunity, for example, if you are having autoimmune disorder which require use of immunosuppressants and you vaccinated at the background of having immunosuppressants, or if you just finished some cancer therapy with chemotherapy, or if you are very, very old, then it's better to drive the test for finding out how much antibodies which you are actually having, and that will give you approximate band where you are well protected, medium protected, or maybe less protected.
Great, thank you, Ansha. I always look at the immune system kind of like a gradient. So with the vaccines, I think we are creating that kind of gradient based on like the underlying diseases that might a person have. It might be that, okay, it may be working fully like sterilizing against the virus, or it might, you can get to some kind of like asymptomatic or maybe some wilder version of the virus. So I think that helps with the question that have been asked one of our attendees. Can you share any facts on testing positive after taking a vaccine? So I think you explained it well. I hope that satisfies that question.
I can
Moving
add something to
Yes.
that, Manpreet, as well. Just in the last few days, there was also press releases shared by both Pfizer and Moderna about looking at their phase 3 clinical trial patients, which are those patients that were tested in the final phase of the clinical trials, who are now approximately 6 months post their second dose. And so they were both sharing news that demonstrated that about 46,000 clinical trial patients, specifically in the Pfizer trial, demonstrated strong protection against COVID, even through 6 months past their second dose. And this is excellent news. And the reason that we don't have additional data is because these clinical trial participants, who are the key, are those individuals who are being tested pretty regularly to measure all of those tests that Ansha mentioned, to see where they are making milestones and where they're seeing a difference in either drop in immunity or a change in immunity. And so I think it's great news news that we're able to say, no matter which vaccine that you received, whether it's the Moderna one or the Pfizer one, that we can show that there is now data demonstrating for the general population that we have at least data demonstrating 6 months of protection against the severest case of COVID. Now, I'm sure that the Johnson & Johnson data, given that they started just a little bit later, will be coming out soon demonstrating similar results.
You're right, pointing at one of the questions that has been asked. One of the attendees probably is now is the right time to ask you that. As far as preventing the mild disease is concerned, how effective is J&J?
Sorry, say that again. How effective?
As far as preventing mild disease is concerned, how effective is J&J vaccine?
So the J&J vaccine actually showed 100% effectiveness against the severest case, which is hospitalization or death. The mild case really depended on the type of populations as well as the variants that they were seeing in that population. And that's because, as I said earlier, the spike proteins are really what help that virus enter into each one of our cells. Because the virus is learning and mutating at each round, it's actually learning how to become a little bit more sly, and I'll use that word at each turn, because it's trying to ensure that there's still an opportunity for it to be infectious. And so when we look at the milder cases, it really is dependent on the type of variant as well as the effects that they might see. But I would say, based on the data that we have for the Johnson & Johnson clinical trial results, it's about 66% effectiveness overall. And that's both on the severe cases as well as the mild cases of COVID, which means that across the various mutations that they studied, as mentioned earlier, they were started later on, but they also really were able to look at the breadth of those mutations that were available. And so I would say that they're generally very effective against all forms of the COVID response.
Great, thank you. Now moving on to another interesting question from our panelists, and that is for Dr. Tagore. So one of the attendees, they have tested positive after taking the vaccine. Can you share any information or insights? Should I be doing anything different now?
Sure. For the most part, it kind of depends on timeline. We talk about the vaccine depending on which one you get, and when you're fully protected against the virus. So obviously with Moderna and Pfizer, you have to get 2 inoculations, and then you have to wait about 2 weeks afterwards. Pfizer has shown some promise in the fact that if you had COVID actually beforehand and got even 1 vaccine, you actually are protected similarly as getting 2 weeks out. That being said, Johnson & Johnson, same thing, you still have to wait a while. So if you got the vaccine and then the next day you're testing positive for COVID, you're still not 100% protected. Now, if you're outside that window of where now you are fully protected by the vaccine itself, I would say that I would just monitor your symptoms. It's just like anything else. The risk is always there of you getting sick, and the risk is always there of you spreading the virus to others, just because if you're sneezing, you're coughing, so the same kind of things that we recommend to anyone who gets sick is going to be there. Washing your hands, and then over-the-counter medication, supportive care is really what it comes down to. The good thing is if you're outside that window and you are protected, the chances of you getting hospitalized are almost none. And there are people who are coming to the emergency room. I see people coming in who have symptoms, but they are testing positive for COVID, but at the same token, they're not getting admitted. And so that's the great thing, is that, you can go back home and just take supportive care measures and then be fine.
Yeah. And again, I would thank you, Dr. Tagore, for your insights on this. I like to highlight there is a gradient of protection also once you're getting the vaccine. So it's not sometimes that you're completely sterilized to the viruses. You might be getting the viruses, but again, just what Dr. Tagore said, you might not be getting hospitalized. You might be getting like the asymptomatic version of the COVID disease. So moving on to the next question, this again for Dr. Tagore, for you, are there any potential long-term effects of COVID from the vaccination? And are there especially for the long haulers?
Sure. So this is a great question. I think.
Can you also, before moving on, can you explain our audience about what long haulers are?
Sure. So a couple things is people who have gotten exposed to coronavirus itself and have recovered. Sometimes they end up having symptoms despite being fully kind of free of the virus itself. People are having additional symptoms a month, 2 months, sometimes even 6 months out. People talk about that loss of taste and smell. There are some people who can't smell for 6 months, persistent loss. There are people who are having persistent headaches. The more common theme that I see is persistent chest pain, persistent shortness of breath, and fatigue. There are a lot of patients who are coming in 2-3 months out from being diagnosed with COVID who are still very fatigued, very weak, and who are still having symptoms. There are a lot of patients who are having, we call them thromboembolic phenomenons. They're having clots, whether it's in their arteries or in their veins. They're clotting in different parts of their bodies. And we're seeing a lot of illnesses that are actually coming from actually getting the virus, now the actual illness of the virus. And these are patients we call long COVID or long haulers. And so these patients are actually carrying other issues, in the long-term perspective. We're continuously watching these patients. We're trying to figure out what are the symptoms that they're having and how we can actually help these patients from a long-term perspective. When we talk about the vaccine, we are again looking at patients and seeing, those who do get exposed, and or even just the vaccine itself. Is there any long-term effect of the vaccine? And I think that's what Pfizer, Moderna, and Johnson & Johnson, they will continuously be doing. They're going to be watching the patients that they enter in their trial from a long-term perspective. This is not a trial that's just done and they've kind of walked away from. They will continuously be evaluating it, looking at various arms and various things to actually identify whether or not there are some effects of it. As of now, we haven't seen anything robust or significant that would kind of make us worrisome. But just like anything else, this is why we have continuous surveillance and continuous studies that are being done to make sure that we can identify those as quickly as possible. The benefit versus risk, all these vaccines are being given under what we call an EUA, emergency use authorization. And what that basically means is that we've looked at the trials, the benefit versus the risk of delaying, administering to the greater population is far worse than actually waiting it out for the entire trial to be completed. And that's one of the biggest things we have to talk about. We are continuously watching this and making sure, but the greater good is in actually administering the vaccine now, so we can actually protect people from dying.
Thank you. It's such a great response. One of the questions that I have come across, and one of our attendees is also asking, maybe Jitendra, you are more familiar with the whole vaccination timeline and its development. What do you think? How about the kids who are below 16? They should be get vaccinated, and when do you think that will be allowed?
Great question. I actually have a 16-year-old myself, and we are trying to work around getting him vaccinated with the Pfizer vaccine, since it was done in studies of 16 years old and older. The next set of group that is being studied by Pfizer are actually the 12 to 15-year-olds, and those studies are actually currently ongoing. Just a few months ago, they had started recruiting. As soon as they got the emergency use authorizations for 16 and older, they actually opened enrollment to recruit for the 12 to 15-year-olds. And I believe that in the next few weeks, we actually should get their preliminary results that demonstrate the safety and efficacy in that younger population as well. And as soon as we have that data, I believe that the next phase really will be 3 and up. And so they are taking a very stepwise and carefully monitored approach to ensure that there is replicable data that's seen from the adults with no additional side effects or concerns as we move into the younger and pediatric populations. So I would say just hang on tight for a few more months, and I should expect to be able to see news coming on those 12 to 15-year-olds relatively soon.
Great, thank you.
I believe it, March 31st, there was a report that was published on Pfizer's trial that you mentioned, looking at adolescents between 12 and 15. There was about 2,200 participants that they had. They showed 100% efficacy and a robust
Awesome.
antibody response. So this is great. It was better than the responses that they saw in the age group of 16 to 25. So very, very promising data. These kids have done really well, and they're touting 100% efficacy.
Actually, you're absolutely right. And that data is actually under review with the FDA right now for the ability to get that emergency use authorization. And we expect hopefully by the next, 5 to 6 weeks, we should be able to have that available.
So any insights on this? This is quite interesting. Any insights on why the younger population, we are getting 100% efficacy?
Well, I would say, I think back to what Ancha was saying, that our levels of memory cells from our B cell and our T cells really starts to degrade as we get older, right? And so this younger population really can retain those memory cells much faster, as well as have that stronger immune response. As we get older, our immune system tends to degrade just with everything else related to age. And so we should anticipate to see strong immune responses in the adolescents compared to some of our other populations. Additionally, those studies were really done in a very tightly controlled population and ethnic group. And so we really expect that data set to be very, very much a controlled data set demonstrating a stronger immune response.
Thank you. Moving on to our next question, which is more about the covariants. And this is a very hot topic in the COVID area. So Dr. Ancha, you have been working in this area. So what do you think about the new covariants which we see from UK and then from South Africa? And what do you think about the vaccines? Do you think we are immune after getting the vaccine to these variants?
Well, variants as such, we expected for a very long time, and here they come. First British variant, then South American variant, and South African variant. Also, we are growing our own variants. Probably you heard about Californian variant, which is spreading through the country as a gradient from California to East Coast. Out of those variants, I would say that British one is least of concern in comparison to South African and South American, but still it's not good. It is causing more disease in the young population than it used to. And in part that is because our older population right now is more protected. So it's part of this as well. The COVID shifted to the younger population simply because older populations are not available to the degree how they were available before then. The immunity, either after vaccine or after the COVID itself, after natural COVID, it's not a plus or minus. It's not like it is here or not here. It is, like Manpreet mentioned, a continuum, a gradient. So immunity cannot be like this switched off. It is fading away. So according to the data which we are having for all three vaccines, and also for some other vaccines as well, the protective levels of the antibodies are defining how well we are protected. So maybe against standard variant, we are protected on this level, and against new variants, we need slightly higher level to be protected. So we will lose protection first for the variants while retaining protection to the original variant. And that's how it would go. So even with the variants, the vaccine shots developed for the old variants still hold. Maybe they would not be protecting against any kind of disease, but will be still protecting against the most severe cases of the disease. They would save you from going into the hospital and, of course, from dying from the disease. That's the most important part. Second part is that all companies already are working on updating the shots and creating the defense against new variants. And it looks like we are coming to a situation when we would have to be revaccinated at some point, when we will actually figure out when the immunity is fading and to what degree it is fading to the variants. For now, what we know is that it is possible to be revaccinated. In mRNA platform, there is absolutely nothing which prevents you from being revaccinated with the same vector. Just with changed insert of the S protein, you would have an update to your shot and you will get back to your natural immunity. With adenovirus vectors, the question is still in the air a little bit. We are not 100% sure that revaccination will work for everybody. It will actually be depending on the immune response to the vector itself, to adenovirus itself, which could be stronger in some people and less strong in some other people. But in any case, we know for sure right now that there could be mix and match without any problems. So even if you get first shot with adenovirus, second shot after the immunity fades could be with mRNA vaccines. And also there are more vaccines which are coming. I can name a few, like Novavax, for example, is finishing trials. It's also a very interesting vaccine. United States Army just published their data on their vaccine which they developed, and maybe AstraZeneca will be eventually approved, and there are other vaccines. So we will be covered in the future. Right now, the most important thing is to get covered now with whatever you can get to in order to get covered.
Great. Thank you, Ancha. We have only 5 minutes left, but I really want to cover some of the questions that have been asked by the attendees. And Ancha, maybe if you can help me explain maybe in a minute or two, I know it might not be possible, but do you think the question is, are all of these vaccines, they are safe for population deficient in G6PD?
Oh, that's a very great question. Actually, I read the questions from the attendees, and those are very specific, very scientific questions. This is great auditorium and great questions. G6PD is a genetic, I wouldn't say genetic disorder, but it is genetic state, which is defining certain property of the body to overreact to certain natural and chemical compounds, usually detected by not be able to tolerate fava beans. Even if this gene is present, this mutation or polymorphism is present in just one copy, not in two, still it is providing for some vulnerabilities in the body to the exposure to the chemical compounds. But this exposure is for intravenous compounds, not for intramuscular injections. All vaccines are going intramuscularly. So they've been absorbed in the muscle right there where you get your shot. They are not getting into your vein. So you should not be worried about immediate effects after this. You should not be worried.
Thank you. Yes, that's thank you for clearing that up. Obviously, it makes sense. We have only 3 minutes left, and the question that has been asked more for the pregnant woman, and Dr. Amandeep, you might have seen this in your experience as well. What do you think? It is okay for people who are pregnant or who are trying to get pregnant to get the vaccine?
Absolutely. It's completely safe. So the ACOG, the American College of Obstetric and Gynecology, have come out in favor of administering the vaccine to women who are pregnant, to women who want to get pregnant, and to women who are breastfeeding. So we know that it is safe to administer in all three kind of spectrums of pregnancy state. And I don't think it should be of any concern. When we talk about, mothers who are breastfeeding, we do see the antibodies that do actually kind of, turn over into the breast milk, into the children as well. So, and even when you get inoculated during pregnancy, we actually see the children who are born, newborns, who are actually having antibodies as well, testing positive for COVID as well. So there is some protective immunity that you're seeing into the kids, just from this phenomenon in itself. But it is completely safe. It's recommended by the American College of Obstetrics and Gynecology and is fully supported by them and most every provider.
Great, thank you. So I think we have only 2 minutes left, but if we have to leave a take-home message, what would it be from you, Dr. Amandeep, then from Jitendra, and then Dr. Ansha? I would like to get that take-home message for everybody who's listening.
Sure. I kind of made like a summary of like just 5 things that I felt that were really top 5 reasons to get vaccinated. So number 1, to curb the spread of the virus and help stop the pandemic, to prevent your family, friends, and coworkers from getting sick. When you get inoculated, if you're coughing, you're not sneezing. If you get the virus and you're vaccinated, you're not going to cough, you're not going to sneeze, you're not going to be so symptomatic to where you're going to spread the disease. This is huge. To develop personal immunity and establish herd immunity, like Antje was saying, we need to establish herd immunity in order to kind of combat this at a global level, to help make sure there are enough medical therapies and hospital beds for those who need them. You know, we saw hospitals at the brink of being overcapacitated with people, and with the vaccine and now therapies, we can actually kind of prevent that from happening and having to make tough decisions on people. Then to avoid shutdowns and social isolation, we need to get back. There's a huge mental health backlash that is happening on the back end of all this. There's a huge mental health crisis that is coming from people dealing with COVID, having to experience COVID, having to actually live in isolation. So there's a real spectrum of issues that have been happening. And so these are my take-home points for everyone.
Anything else to add, Jitendra?
Yeah, absolutely. I think Dr. Amandeep hit, you know, pretty much the major points that I would also emphasize. And I would add to the fact that that just to get everyone comfortable with the idea of the vaccines that are available, there is a lot of data that you can research yourself. The CDC has published pretty much on a consistent basis a list of information. And I think one of the things that we in the scientific community are really excited about is the ability to share information and be transparent with what we are learning, because we're going through this pandemic together and we are going to get out of it together. So it's not just, you know, the scientific community pushing vaccinations. It really is going to be our doorway to getting back to normal. And Dr. Amandeep very articulately, you know, mentioned that the impact that the isolation, as well as just the lack of being able to work as a community organization, really has been detrimental, not just to us, but also to our children and to our families and to our community as a whole. So I would encourage everybody, you know, do your research, look up the information that makes you want to learn about what the vaccines are about, but know that we're working hard to ensure that the information is transparent, realistic, and as real time as possible. I'm excited by the fact that we've seen such amazing results. Never in my lifetime would I had expected to see, you know, efficacy results demonstrating vaccinations working on the immune system in a 95%. That means practically everybody that was exposed to the vaccines saw an amazing level of responsiveness that demonstrated immunity. And that really is what we're going to need to do, is as a community continue to push those vaccinations so that we can all move past this pandemic.
Thank you. Anja, you would like to add anything?
Absolutely. Because I'm an optimist, I always tend to see silver lining first in everything. So I get to silver lining. Coronavirus gave us a lot of good things. One of the good things is that a lot of people who would never meet scientists, they met and they started to work together on the problems. Also, a lot of scientists like me, for example, get more chances to talk to general public, which I think to everybody's benefit. And the most importantly is that general public get educated in things which we never dreamed that they would be really interested in and get educated. So right now we are having very great penetration of the knowledge about vaccines, not just vaccines as like a concept, but the platforms, types of the vaccines, minuscule differences between mRNA vaccines and adenoviral vaccines. I see those questions asked in Q&A, and people are asking about specific genotypes and how they respond to vaccine. This is very high level knowledge. If I would ask professors in my department, I would not bet that every professor will know this gene, yes? But you do, and this is great. And I see how it is right now trickling to other areas of healthcare. It's not only vaccines and coronavirus anymore. People start to understand diabetes better. people start to understand altogether infectious diseases better and understand the differences between chronic and acute diseases. They suddenly became expert in various kinds of cardiovascular conditions. They better understand stroke, neurology, and psychiatry as well. And this is right now part of public discussion, which is very, very important thing. So thank you very much, coronavirus, for that. This is my silver lining. And for everybody, get the vaccine as soon as possible because we all need it.
Great. Thank you, Ansha. Thank you. That was a really good message. Like we are getting something positive out of this coronavirus. So I think I would like to wrap up today for a wonderful discussion with our expert panels. And thank you so much for answering all the questions. I know there are a lot more questions and probably we will be able to answer them as well, but the time is not permitting as of now. So we'd like to close like in a couple of minutes. But on behalf of Punjabi Chamber of Commerce, I would also like to invite and ask people to get involved. We need the leadership, we need the involvement from a broad base of community leaders. And please become a part of the Punjabi Chamber of Commerce for your business and for our community. So with that, I'll just thank you everyone for attending today. And hopefully we will be sending out the survey. So if you guys need us to have another session on COVID, we will be more than happy to do that. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. Great to
Thank
speak to you all.
Thank you, Manpreet, for inviting me. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Thanks, Ansha. Thanks, Dr. Tagore. All right. Good night, everyone.
Good night.